We're live, Chair.
Thank you, Connor. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Scrutiny today, to the Health and Care Scrutiny Committee, Bore Da Pawb. We've got a number of different items on the agenda today, but before we get onto those, just go through some housekeeping. Have we got any apologies, please, Connor?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from councillors Chris Walsh, Elvin Vaughan, Highland Home, Gareth E. Jones, Benjamin Breeze, Richard Church, Cabinet Member for a Safer Powys, Jack Straw, Chief Executive Officer, and Sharon Powell, Head of Children's Services.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Just on that one, just because I'm not 100% sure what item 6 is covering. Is this covering opportunities for adults with disabilities, or how would we know whether we've got a declaration of interest for item 6, which is the Work, Leisure and Learning Programme update?
Chair, would you like me to answer that? Or
yes, please. Yeah, if you could just even an overview, just so councillors can consider whether or not there's anyone they know who might be in receipt of those services.
Work, Leisure and Learning, it's a piece of work ongoing at the moment. Sorry, Rachel's just joined as well, but it's about day opportunities, so employment, etc., leisure opportunities for older people and for younger people as well. But Rachel's here, and perhaps she could give the detail of if there may be any conflicts of interest or declarations required for the committee.
Thank you, Nina. Rachel?
Yes, just to add to that, so the focus of the presentation will be very much around the engagement and co-production work that currently is underway to work with people who are currently in receipt of day services and day centre provision to understand future aspirations and a sustainable model for the future.
If any members have got family links then with people who access day services, I think it would be worth you declaring an interest. I can't see any hands up, so I'll take that as none. Okay, disclosure of party whips. None to record. Minutes and action log. We've got 2 sets of minutes and a draft minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at those? Anyone got any comments on those previous minutes? I'm happy with them. In that case, Connor, do we need a proposer and a seconder for those?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah, could I have someone to propose those, please? I'm just thinking of who might have been. Edwin, I think you were at those meetings. Carol and Liz, I think you were at those meetings as well. Josie, I think you were at one. I'm not sure if you were at both. Josie, were you at both?
I did attend both. I don't think
great.
I was at the first one for the full length of time, but I'm happy to most definitely propose the notes that I've read.
Okay, great.
Can I I'll second.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Great. Okay, so first main item on the agenda is the Corporate Safeguarding Board Activity Report. Just so that any members of the public are aware, this comes to scrutiny on a regular basis so that we can hear how the actions are progressing following the audit of corporate safeguarding that previously took place. We have made a number of recommendations historically, which are recorded in our previous minutes and tracker. And so today's purpose is to have an update on that, and also to hear some comments from officers regarding elective home education, which was one of our previous comments from the previous time this came to scrutiny, so that we can hear about how that is being brought into the remit of corporate safeguarding, given that there's some changes that have taken place from Welsh Government in that regard. So Nina, am I handing over to you on this one?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Bore Da, good morning. I'm here today to give an update on the Corporate Safeguarding Board, which took place on the 8th of June. Appreciate this has been a longer gap than normal before we come to yourselves to provide an update, but with the summer and leave, etc., this is a little bit later than we would normally expect, so apologies for that. A very detailed and agenda, really full conversations and discussion with lots to discuss in the safeguarding arena. The first item we looked at was a review of progress against the actions on the safeguarding regulatory tracker. The board noted that there were 4 actions on the tracker with a completion date that had passed, and so we reviewed those in detail. The board noted that the one action, which was relating to requiring the publication of lead officer and lead member for safeguarding roles and responsibilities, had been completed. So this action would be closed on the tracker. The action requiring the volunteer safer recruitment policy had been completed pending a few minor amendments. So the board noted that those amendments would be completed as soon as possible, and then the policy would be circulated to the board. And once that happened, the action would be closed. The 2 other actions with a review date that had passed were relating to the gathering of contractual monitoring information from services regarding the monitoring and addressing of safeguarding issues, and the clarification of powers expectations of contracts regarding safeguarding training that had taken longer to be reframed. So those deadlines had been discussed and extended. And as requested by yourselves in Scrutiny, a copy of the tracker an action plan has now been included in your updates as well for information. We have a mandatory item on every agenda where we feed back the comments from yourselves, Health and Care Scrutiny, but also Governance and Audit as well. So and for Cabinet. So all of those comments were fed back. Cabinet on the 23rd of May had accepted the previous report and noted the progress of actions. Comments from Health and Care Scrutiny on the 2nd of June were discussed. That firstly, the elective home education lead attends a future scrutiny to explain the themes around children being educated at home. This was agreed. I'm looking, I don't think we have somebody here today, Chair. We have a lot of work ongoing at the moment in education with an inspection in October, and we have had recent guidance from Welsh Government. So if there is nobody here today to provide an update, could I suggest that we include that on a Health and Care Scrutiny Committee post-October. The Contracts and Procurement Lead attends the future scrutiny to update on changes in contract management. And we have the Professional Lead for Commercial Services, Wayne Wellesby, here this morning. So after my update, Wayne is willing to give a little bit of an update and take any questions that the committee may have. That safer internet usage could be considered as a safeguarding theme of the month, and that other methods of communication could and should be used to spread the message of safeguarding, including schools, town and community councils, leisure centres, county councillors, etc. And this was agreed. And that statistics about mandatory safeguarding training compliance in the future should include school staff and volunteers, and that the process around this would be explored. That is a piece of work that is ongoing with the school service at the moment, and we are expecting at a future corporate safeguarding board that information starts to be fed forward in terms of staff and volunteers. The scrutiny had asked what time frame is set for staff to complete mandatory training, and the board would advise that there is a 2-week deadline that is recommended for new members of staff to complete their mandatory training. Scrutiny had also asked how staff without access to computers access mandatory training, and a member of the team provided a briefing to the board on this. The board informed that hard copies of mandatory training are provided to staff, and that's proven to be very successful, people completing the hard copies of training, etc. But also delivery is happening with people, say, for example, HTR workers in the depots, for example, and we're providing training at times and days that suit their work patterns. And all of this has seen very positive outcomes. And I'd really like to share with the committee the statistics from catering and cleaning. On the 1st of June, compliance with mandatory training was 44.7%. By 1st of June, 85.8%, which is really significant, fantastic work. Because of course, you know, catering and cleaning, a very large number of staff spread across the whole of the county without access to ICT and IT equipment, etc. So to improve the compliance rates in that timescale by so much is really very impressive. And equally HTR, so highways, transport and recycling, improving compliance from 67.8% to 96.6%, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think from me as chair of the board, I just want to note my thanks to all the team and the heads of service there for all the work they've done in terms of their mandatory training compliance, really significant improvements. Scrutiny requested to see the action plan included in future activity reports. As I said, we've included that. And feedback from governance and audit would be fed back to the September board of corporate safeguarding. The next item was a SWAP DBS audit. The board were provided with an audit report and appendices, and a member of SWAP attended the meeting and confirmed the DBS team had high assurance. There were some areas that were given a more limited assurance and noted as taxis, foster carers and procurement with improvements needed. The heads of service for those areas confirmed that remedial actions had been identified, agreed, and had been or were already in the process of being implemented. It was noted that the actions from the audit will be incorporated into the regulatory tracker and monitored moving forward. That's just really key. Safeguarding audits and self-assessments. It's something that we have to do annually, is we ask our heads of service as part of their self-assessment and self-evaluation work to include safeguarding within that piece of work. Further work was ongoing to analyse the information collated from that audit at the time of this meeting in June. And to note at that stage that there had been some difference in how heads of service had completed the template. Not all of the questions were relevant for all service areas, so reflection given on the questions used in the future, and that heads of services had allocated themselves actions and a lot of communication and reminders and to staff, etc., which has been ongoing. As a result, we decided that more work would be done on this, and it will be discussed at a future board, and it was discussed at the September meeting a couple of days ago. Preparations for National Safeguarding Week. It's in November, and Powys, we're hosting the National Safeguarding Conference on the 16th of November in Bilfwells. The theme is safeguarding in rural communities, and we're making sure that we're obviously very involved with the conference, and the communication team will be linking with safeguarding leads, really promoting and communicating messages from this key event in November. Safeguarding theme of the month. Lots of cross-cutting themes, ideas were suggested as potentially suitable for the programme, including aligning with national awareness raising weeks as well, wherever possible. So the suggestions from the board and from yourselves, the Scrutiny, were drafted into a table with a plan for the next 12 months being pulled together. The board agreed subjects should be bite-sized, so no big chunks of information or lots of information to read, etc., to promote accessibility and understanding, given the scope and variety of audiences that we want to be attracting. And just to give you an up-to-date information, if I may, I think our first safeguarding theme, bite-size, will be going live next week. So look out for Spotlight on Safeguarding updates that will hopefully hit in your inboxes and on your media soon.
Are you able to tell us what that theme is, or is that highly confidential?
No, it's not highly confidential. The first month is going to be what is safeguarding. So we're going to start with making sure that everybody's clear on what safeguarding is, etc. I think the second month then is something to do with young people, and then November is going to be safeguarding in rural communities, and all linking up with all of the information that's going to come out of Safeguarding Week and the Safeguarding Conference that we're hosting. So yeah, but we've got a bit of a rough timetable now for 12 months. And just to note, Chair, if I may, that we now have some additional support from an officer who's helping lead on that with us with communications as well. So really positive, and perhaps in the future we can kind of go through a bit more of the detail on that and get some feedback from yourselves on how it's working. The next item we had was a report on annual private fostering. So the board were informed what private fostering arrangements are and how they fall within childcare legislation. So it applies to any child under the age of 16 who moves into another household outside of their immediate family. So it could be a friend, for example, for longer than 28 days. The board were informed that the local authority has statutory duties to assess, undertake DBS checks and a visit to ensure a child is safe and that needs are being met. The board had lots of questions, lots of discussion on this, and we were told there have only been 2 private fostering arrangements notifications to the local authority in the preceding 12 months, with 2 arrangements in place at the time of the board meeting in June. So awareness raising was key here. The board noted that this should be to promote a sense of support and good outcomes. So this is not seen as the local authority interfering or intruding in any way, just there as a support mechanism. Guidance and support is available for social workers because this is a less common area of work, and the private fostering report to be circulated to all councillors to increase their awareness and understanding, and that was completed. So I hope that you all had a chance to have a look perhaps on the information that was shared following that board. We then moved into our reports by exception. So the first one was on young people's housing, a really good discussion on options for young people who are homeless and the challenges around that, with some reflections on some real life examples discussed at the board as well. On occasions, for example, we discussed cases where bread and breakfast was actually the least worst option for a young person because of promoting their safety, better outcomes, etc. So discussions around that, and the board were also updated about some housing development business cases that were being progressed, which actually went to Cabinet in July. So we are moving on with those, and that's the interim accommodation, modular accommodation business cases that you may have seen going through Cabinet. Elective home education, the board were informed that the Welsh Government guidance on this matter had now been received, but the team would need time to reflect on the new guidance that has been received and the appropriate service developments that will be needed as a result of it. So that work is still ongoing within the education team. Mandatory safeguarding training, the board were informed that all service areas had increased their compliance with both safeguarding and VAUDA SV training. The board did question and query children's services compliance, which was at 82%, which was lower than other service areas. The service responded to that challenge board and had said that they had reflected within children's services on whether staff should actually complete the mandatory training, because of course children's services staff have so much other safeguarding training and to a higher level as well. But actually, once they considered it and reviewed it, they determined that they would continue to ask staff to undertake the corporate mandatory training, because of course it covers other areas, including adult safeguarding. So it was important that they had that kind of wider scope and training as well. Compliance is being addressed. The head of service provided assurance through supervision, and so they would be looking to increase their compliance over the next few months, etc. It was noted that the VAUDA SV Ask and Act training compliance was at 91%, excuse me, which compared very favourably with other local authorities. Adult social care safeguarding performance, the board were informed that the appointeeship and deputyship unit had received a positive outcome report following inspection by the Office of the Public Guardian. Real credit to the quality of the work and rigour of the team there as well. Children's safeguarding performance was discussed. The board looked at there were some dips in some areas of performance, but the trajectory overall was showing improvement. Numbers of children on the Child Protection Register were around 100, which is lower than it had been for the previous 12 months. Then in item 3, we looked at future agenda items. So you can see the things that we have lined up coming up. And there were some matters of any other business as well. The board, Home Office anti-terrorism notifications. So the board were informed that the property planning and public protection team had received correspondence regarding anti-terrorism information sharing processes, particularly relating to notifications about individuals who do or may post a threat. to Paris. So we had to sign and return a memorandum of communication and identify a prevent lead to allow the Home Office to share notifications with Paris. So the board agreed that the prevent lead would be a senior manager in the public protection team as agreed, and the notifications would be going to them from now on. Safeguarding fora, the board were informed that these multi-agency learning and development sessions had stopped during COVID, but they have now resumed. The first one was held with 75 delegates, which is excellent attendance, and it was looking at the subject of sexually harmful behaviour with a guest speaker coming along to that fora. The aim is to run 2 sessions a year, although it may be more because there's been so much interest in it. Partner agencies are being encouraged to use the Safeguarding Fora banner to run their own safeguarding learning events as well. Then we note the future safeguarding board meetings, and that's the end of my update, Chair. But just to note and a reminder that we do have Wayne here, so any questions on the contract kind of management procurement side of stuff, I'm sure Wayne would really welcome the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nina. Yes, I'm sure members will have a couple of questions. Just on Wayne's involvement from a contract management point of view, Wayne, are you able to just give us a quick overview, please, as to how safeguarding, corporate safeguarding has been addressed from your perspective within that forum?
Sorry, just to mute myself. If you don't mind, Chair, I'll just quickly share a couple of slides actually that I've got, which sort of set out some of the work we've been doing in this area.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
So hopefully people can see that slide.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So just briefly then, in terms of the context, contract management is a key tool for the organisation. It has been identified, obviously, through the safeguarding audit, but also another review actually that was undertaken by the organisation back in 2019 in relation to the SIPFA 5-star council review. So identified weakness. What we've sought to do is actually put in place a corporate approach to contract management. So we have a consistency across the board, making sure we're building on good experience and good practices where they apply, and addressing weaknesses where identified. So the key sort of theme about contract management is that it drives improved benefits realization. So the key objectives that you had in terms of the contract when that was established, make sure those things happen. It's a real clear mechanism to monitor contract performance and make sure actually that we're identifying and managing any risks that may arise. And certainly as our needs change, making sure we've got mechanisms in place to flex those contracts and improve performance and explore opportunities as and when they're identified over the term of the contract. Importantly, there is a number of examples whereby contract management, where done wrong or poorly, can have significant impacts on the performance of organisations. And I've just got a quick note there in terms of organisation, professional body, global professional body in relation to procurement to commercial, the World Commerce and Contracting identified that organisations can lose up to the value of 9.3% on average of the value of their contracts through ineffective contract management. So what we have sought to do is actually bring in a corporate consistent approach using 3 key sort of elements or building blocks to that. So the first one is around systems and processes. So making sure we have a clear, effective approach to how we manage our contracts. We've put in place a mechanism to classify or categorize our contracts based on value and risk and complexity, to make sure we're dedicating our resources to those areas that most need it. And within that, we've got 4 tiers. So platinum, which is high risk, high value, down to a bronze contract, which is of lower value and lower risk, and therefore making sure we're dedicating our resources, like I say, to those areas most needed. What we've also put in place, or what we're building in terms of putting in place, is around improving our data and intelligence, and that was identified through the audit around effective monitoring and clarity in terms of how organisations are, how suppliers are actually ensuring that they're undertaking the monitoring requirements that was set out in terms of our approach to safeguard and making sure those mechanisms are in there. So we're improving our data sources, and also about bringing that together in a clear place where we can have that visibility and have that visibility corporately. And then thirdly, around skills development, so making sure we've got the right skills in the right place to make sure we're effectively managing contracts. So that's a sort of 2-level phase. So we're in the process of those contract managers across the organisation who are responsible for managing contracts with suppliers, whereby we spend in excess of £1 million. They've been undertaking a contract management approach training module, which is produced by the government commercial function, central government body, and we've been utilising that training. That's a sort of 10-hour training course, and making sure we've got those mechanisms in place, and we're pretty much complete. That actually everybody in sits in that space have done that training, and then we'll be rolling that down to further tiers as we proceed. So just to sort of cover in terms of how we've tiered our approach. So where we've got a platinum contract, high value, high complexity, high risk, making sure actually we're really clear in terms of how we prioritise the resources and the level of intensity and frequency that people undertake in terms of their contract management. So this approach was agreed yesterday in the Commercial Performance and Risk Board, and we'll now be working with people across the organisation to roll that out. Yeah, so that was just a quick snapshot of how we're taking that corporate approach, making sure we've got those mechanisms in place to ensure effective contract management, and importantly, have that corporate visibility of contract performance, including within that, obviously, monitoring of safeguarding needs.
Wayne, could you just give us an example, just so we can sort of make sense of this, because it's obviously quite corporate and commercial, as to what the, in reality, how has the steps you've put in place mitigated the risk of in a safeguarding perspective? What is it that's been done so that people that are contractors are aware of safeguarding, or know where to take concerns, etc.?
I think 2 parts to that, Joe, if I may. First of all, this is early days for us, so actually we're in the process of rolling this out. We've agreed as of yesterday the criteria that sets out that determines whether things are a platinum or a bronze level contract. But within that, where it is a platinum contract, for example, and we would expect contracts that actually include mechanisms or requirements in terms of safeguarding, then actually there's a laid down criteria in terms of the frequency, in terms of how those contract management review meetings should be undertaken, and the data actually and clarity of performance that actually particularly addresses one of the issues that was identified in the audit in terms of that lack of consistency and lack of clarity of individual contract managers, making sure that they are identifying and monitoring contract safeguarding performance.
Okay, so am I right in thinking then, so say for example we are building a new school, and that obviously would be a high value contract, and that could involve a high number of people coming to an area to work, that there would be safeguarding provisions tied into those contract review meetings to ensure that, you know, there's no
where safeguarding provisions are identified in the contract. This will provide assurance, corporate assurance, that actually individually those contracts and those contract managers are managing those contracts to ensure that all provisions that set out in the contract, including safeguarding requirements, actually are identified and robustly managed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Liz, I can see you've got a question. You're on mute though.
Yeah, it's an example question again, Wayne. So if we're subcontracting, say, a service for accommodation for 16 and 17-year-olds, within one of these 4 boxes, you know, the platinum, the gold, would we be monitoring whether or not the service, you know, the subcontractors have got DBS checks, for example? You know, would you be, in your contract management, your quarterly reviews or whatever, be checking that all new staff and all existing staff have been checked for DBS?
We will be checking. We will be assuring that the requirements of the contract are set out and checked against that. So where it actually states within that contract there is a DBS requirement and monitoring against that, then that will be undertaken in those contract management processes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a little bit more detail to that as well. So one of the areas of work that we've been working really closely with Wayne on is the development of an annual self-assessment form, which essentially started off life within the context of social care. But actually, when we looked at the individual elements of that, which not only include safeguarding, but a wide variety of other areas where we expect contracts to have good processes in place, when Wayne and myself looked at this, we thought actually this really lends itself to a whole organisation and a far wider approach. So that's certainly something that as a tool we're looking to adopt on a much wider level, and that will provide the opportunity for organisations and contractors to be able to self-assess against a range of certain requirements, and for us to be able to undertake a desktop audit and be able to focus where we need to have more clear efforts in terms of some specific organisations.
Okay, thank you. I think we have got Michael Gedrin here, and we are going to have an update on the elective home education, which I'm pleased to hear. So I can't see any other councillors' hands up. And Sarah Quibble's here as well. So Michael and Sarah, welcome to Scrutiny. Thank you for coming. This is something that we had requested come to Scrutiny, given that there's lots of changes in this area. And I just, you know, it'd be good to hear from you really as to what you've been doing to incorporate the changes that are being put in place from the Welsh Government guidance, and how things are shaping up. And I know that members have got questions on this area, so I think I'll just hand over to whichever one of you is going to lead on this.
Thank you. Oh, you go, Mike. Michael's going to lead to start with.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Councillor. So yes, there have been changes to the statutory guidance from Welsh Government. What we've been doing over the past couple of years, because I think that's relevant, is Welsh Government have provided additional funding. So we had used that funding to revamp our systems of contact and how we did things with elective home educated families. So really, the changes were already in place prior to the new guidance coming out. What we're doing with that new guidance, because it's statutory guidance on us as a local authority, it's not a legislative change for families, but what we're doing is we're making sure they're aware of the changes to the statutory guidance and the expectations on us as a local authority, so that they have an idea of the expectations we have on them in terms of contact with us. So we're in contact with our elective home educated families anyway. And what we're now doing is arranging to meet with them and making sure they're aware of the enhanced onus on them that is laid out in this statutory guidance from Welsh Government. I don't know if there are any specific questions
Yeah, I think we do have specific questions. So I'll just kick it off with just like a sort of a start. Obviously, home education can be quite a sensitive topic for lots of families, and there are many families that home education is absolutely the right thing for their children. So it's important that we recognise that, and that we see that these changes in a positive light, not a way to sort of label these children as being particularly at risk, because that's not really what this is about. But I just wanted to ask, you said who the who our elected home education children are. How do we get that definitive list? How do you have that information?
So to be crystal clear, it's not necessarily a definitive list, because we can only know about the families and the children that we know about.
Okay.
Families are not required to register with local authorities. So some do, and are more than happy to, and will approach us when their child is in preschool and make us aware. Others will have enrolled their child in a school and then decided that they're going to move to elective home education, in which case they do have to inform the school, and then the school informs us, and we have a process for that. We will also have queries from other local authorities where families will have been living outside of Powys, either attending a school or being electively home educated and known to that authority, and that authority will make us aware when they believe that family has moved here. And then also other officers of the local authority in other departments or other agencies will raise queries with us where it becomes apparent to them that somebody may be electively home educated, and that might be another way that we find out about a child. Once we know about them, there's no choice really. We can't unknow the fact that we know that they're there, that they cannot opt for us to know, but they can opt not to tell us in the first instance, and that is absolutely legal, and there is no issue with that.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Michael's right with all of those avenues of kind of understanding if a family's EHE, but I think our understanding is robust. If we become aware that a child is potentially missing education, which we may be aware of ourselves, or we may be informed by a partner agency or a partner agency outside of the locality, the local authority area, then we follow that up as well. In some cases, it may be that they would be electively home educating, in which case we would then follow our normal contact processes. In the majority of cases, it would be about supporting that learner to re-engage with school. But I just wanted to make it really clear that as soon as we are aware of a child, we would follow that up with the relevant processes and ensure that they're engaging with education, whether that be at school or the parents clearly informing us that they're electively home educated.
And if I could just come in, we have robust children missing education processes. That's not to say that EHE is always linked to CME, but the two mesh together very well. And what we also know from the work that we've done over the past couple of years is that more families have come forward because of the work that we've done and that proactive approach we've taken. So where there is an increase in numbers, that's not necessarily just down to more people electively home educating, it's down to more people coming forward and engaging with the local authority.
Okay, thank you. Right, I can see members have got their hands up. So Councillor Edwin, do you want to kick us off, please, with questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Going on what you were saying there now, Sarah, this is something that I'm concerned about. Children that are being home taught, are they being monitored on a regular basis, or is the mentors going with them?
So,
sorry,
Councillor, I butted in there. I thought you'd finished your question. Do carry on.
Yeah, no, just checking. Are they mentored? Is there a mentor going with them? Are they monitored? And because they need to attain a good standard, as it were. And I think something was brought up a little bit earlier with us, because when children are in school, quite often, if there are, shall we say, speech issues, that again is followed through.
So it's very clear in legislation that if a family decide to electively home educate, they are assuming all responsibility for the child's education, and the local authority has no responsibility towards that education other than to take appropriate action if it becomes apparent that that child is not receiving a suitable education. The shift in onus in the Welsh Government statutory guidance that came out in May is that families are now expected to proactively prove that the child is receiving a suitable education, whereas in the past it was certainly interpreted very widely that the onus was on us to react when we became aware of an issue, not for the families to have to proactively prove that to us. That's just my summary really of that shift in onus to make that clear. We do engage very well with families. We do advise and guide. And what we have been able to do in certain cases is where families may have made a decision almost as a knee-jerk reaction, if I can use that phrase, to a particular issue, and it's clear that it's not in the best interest of the child or the family, we've been able to work with them and support them to get the child back into school after maybe only a period of a couple of days of elective home education registration. Sarah, did you want to come in there? Is that all right, Councillor Jana?
Yeah, that's fine. I just perhaps Sarah can answer this as well. Just to slightly rephrase Edwin's question, really is what does contact look like? So when when you're engaging, what does that look like? And that might give more of a sort of an idea.
I think contact is largely driven by the family, and within the new legislation, as with the old one, families do not have to engage should they wish not to. As Michael said, we have new systems and processes in place where we are, proactively engaging with families, and whether that they're more comfortable perhaps to come to a library setting or something like that to have those initial conversations to build up that relationship. And I think it really is taken on a family by family basis to make sure that they're comfortable meeting with the officers and building that relationship. So then it will be easier to understand how we can support where possible, and any signposting. For example, the reason I put my hand up is when the information goes out to the families, there is information about school nursing, so that important link is made for those families, even though their children aren't based in a statutory school and they're home educated.
So lots of the contact will be via telephone, email, but it's regular contact with the family as well as that face-to-face contact as well. It's, as Sarah said, it's building that relationship rather than the idea that you must present your child at a given time once a year, say, for example.
That initial information that they get from the council then provides them with where they would need to go if they felt their child needed to access speech therapy or any other resources that might be, able to be tapped into if a child needed it.
It may not go into quite that detail, but it does have the contact details for school nursing, and it has information around additional learning needs. And of course, if it becomes apparent to an officer of the local authority that a child may have ALN, then that's very clear in the ALN code that there's a responsibility to make the appropriate referral along with the parental consent around that. So there are ways to do that, and that relationship with the family is what supports with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Josie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. Josie, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sarah, for coming along. I was actually with a home education group on Monday because my children are quite passionate about us changing the way we educate our children. So it was great to go along to a group in Landrindod. It is very well attended and well advertised, which is great. So that's nice to hear. My question is, do you have a percentage or a number of how many children are being educated at home in Powys at the moment, just so we can have a figure?
If I just quote you the figure from the 30th of August, I could get you today's figure because, of course, it fluctuates. Some children go back into school, some come off. But as of the 30th of August, there were 312 children registered as electively home educated in Powys.
Okay, thank you. And would it be possible for you to give us figures, say, before COVID happened? Because I know that a lot of family had changed the way that they...
Roughly speaking, that's about double, Councillor,
okay, thank you.
to where it was pre-COVID. That's very similar to the picture that's seen over local authorities in Wales. And I believe England, I know the Welsh figures slightly better than I know the English figures. But as I say, I think we have to be very careful to highlight the fact that this is not just because of COVID, it's because of that increased support that we're offering from the local authority, and families are coming forward who have been there before COVID and electively home educating, but had chosen not to make themselves known to the local authority at that point. And the major reason for elective home education is still overwhelmingly ideological / philosophical, not anything to do with COVID.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that question. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to come back on that point?
Yeah, I was just going to add some additional numbers, really, because we are aware at all points of how many children are registered electively home educated with us, and we have to provide information to the Welsh Government on a monthly basis, and not just about the numbers, but including whether they would have been eligible for free school meals or whether they have additional learning needs. So during I'm just picking up on where, during the last academic year, there were 177 children and young people that were newly registered as EHE. However, 49 children and young people deregistered and returned to school, and a further 47 ceased to be EHE at the end of year 11, which technically is the 30th of June 23, as they were no longer of statutory school age. So we are keeping note, on a weekly basis of the numbers, and really ensuring that we're up to date and supporting those families where possible, as possible.
And we use WCCIS and Teacher Centre, which is our management information system, to maintain those records. And the beauty of using Teacher Centre in that way is if they were in a school, they immediately transfer over into the new pseudo school, if you like, which is Powys EHE on Teacher Centre. So those records are always up to date.
And we have that full pupil history then, don't we? So we can see. And I think that's an important point, is that sometimes there are periods of EHE and then a child may return to school. And that's why we've made a recent change to how our education welfare team is working. So rather than having separate EHE workers, it's all now encompassed within the education welfare role, so that if they're working with a family and the child is at school, then they choose to home educate. They're still working with the same education welfare officer for that contact when they're EHE, and they're still working with the same one should the child return to school, to give that continuity.
And when they're
Sarah,
liaising
that sounds great.
Sorry,
could I just bring you up? Sorry.
I was just going to say very quickly on the education welfare officers as well, when they're liaising with the EHE families, they refer to themselves as EHE advisors, because we're aware that sometimes having an education welfare officer involved when you electively home educate there's a negative connotation. So we're getting around that as well.
Josie, did you want to come back on
terminology? Yes, there was just a small point that Sarah raised. Obviously, if the child is at school and they are receiving free school meals, what happens when they are home educated? How are we making sure that the health and nutrition that we're trying to provide them at school also continues within their household? Are they given vouchers, Sarah, or what happens?
There is no remit for that.
They've chosen to withdraw them from education.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Liz.
Oh, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I think, Michael, you said that the onus is on the families to demonstrate that the education that they're providing is effective. So I just wondered how that works. So is that something that you might ask from time to time, or is it something that you have a means of assessing?
Sorry. So yes, on an annual basis, we've always asked for an annual report, but we're slowly moving the expectation around that to that it will depend on a case by case basis.
Yes.
Some families are more than happy to provide you with a glut of information. Also, meeting with the child is an expectation that's been brought in the statutory guidance. It's an expectation, it's not a requirement. So we're slowly moving families across, we're drip feeding that idea that we expect more frequent communication with you, and ideally to see your child to be able to evidence that education. Because the education they provide doesn't have to conform to the curriculum for Wales and can take whatever form they want, and there's no minimum hours. And actually for EHE, lots of families would argue that they're educating almost every waking hour of the day because everything's a learning opportunity for them. So there's no sort of checklist approach to take, because it will have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the reason I ask really is, you know, it's always good to see milestones, isn't it? And for children themselves to see the progress, you know, that they're making, and for that to be, you know, transparent and open. The other question I've got is around ALN, because anecdotally, I sometimes pick up that, you know, some children really struggle in school, because the school has not got the resources, or because, you know, the ALN facilities, you know, are just not there, or the children are just not able to, you know, to settle in the school because you know, it's not, they don't feel comfortable really, and you know, the behaviour might be something that you know, is not necessarily being supported as well. So do you find that there is any evidence that that people are needing to leave you know, mainstream education and take the children out because the facilities are not there to support them in the school?
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't commit to that. Sorry, word find difficult, but
I know.
definition. I would say the ALN system is there and it can provide support, but people in certain circumstances will make their own personal decision about what they believe is right for their child. I do know that sometimes there may be third sector, and this is more coming from England, I would say, rather than anything local, but sometimes there will be online support that families will access where perhaps it's advocated that it would be better in their case to take the child out of school. By building the relationships with the families, though, what we're able to do is we're able to have those conversations with them, discuss what might be best for their child, and actually ensure the remit and the raison d'etre really for the Education Welfare Service is to ensure that children are able to access the educational entitlement that they should have. So that may be a decision somebody makes at a certain point, but we can then work with them and we can remedy that. And the ALN system does have the support there that is able to provide for those children in school, if that's what the parent wants to choose, and we can support families with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start wrapping this up, just because we've got 2 more item agendas. Sarah, did you want to come back briefly on anything that's been raised?
Yeah, just a very small point after that discussion around ALN. As I mentioned, we do have to submit the monthly figures to the Welsh Government, and that includes whether a child is eligible for free school meals when they were at school and if they had ALN. So I just wanted to confirm there certainly wasn't a disproportionate number of children who were being registered as EHE who also have additional learning needs, and I would say it was probably lower than the school-based population.
Okay,
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Just a very quick question for me, which perhaps you could answer in the chat, Sarah or Michael, and it's just out of my own interest. Do we know of any families electively home educating who then sign up their children to a remote school that's not a power school? I know that there's quite a few remote online schools cropping up, and if so, would they be classed as home educated?
Yes, they'd be home educated.
Okay.
Yes, they would. Yeah, it's not the same as an independent school. There are a few.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any other questions on the corporate safeguarding report that Nina gave? Just before I move on to the the next agenda items, I've just got a couple, Nina, if that's okay. Just firstly, the link to the tracker in the report doesn't work for me. I don't think it worked for Councillor Liz either. So just to double check that. The annual private fostering report, which you mentioned is going out to, it has gone out to councillors, hasn't it? Does it also go to schools?
I'll have to double check. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. And yes, and I don't think there's anybody here in the meeting who could answer that. So apologies, I will find out though.
Yeah, I think it would be worth that going out to school heads, just so that everybody is aware of what private fostering arrangement is.
Yeah.
And they can then
I think it might have done, but I will double check. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. And then the themes of the month that's starting soon.
Yep.
And you said to look at in our inboxes, and you said you've got additional officer support on that as well. I presume, therefore, that because of what we said previously, that is going to be shared to the sectors and outside of the council.
Yes, we're looking at how we can spread it through different networks, etc., to try and target schools, I think town and community councils, etc. Yeah, so we're looking to go wider than normal
I think
channels.
we'd also mentioned about doctor surgeries as well, and everything. So that'll be great if we could have an update in our tracker once you know what that plan is, because it will show Scrutiny has made a difference. And then finally, the National Safeguarding Conference that's going to be happening in Bilth. From a council perspective, are cabinet members going to that? Who's going to it? And is it open to us or not? Is it appropriate for me to ask whether or not members might be able to go if they wanted to?
Yeah, I have to double check. I know there's a limited number of people who can attend on the day, and I know we've got a certain allocation. We do have some councillors attending, etc. But can I double check? And if there's any spaces available in our allocation, then yeah, I'd absolutely love to open it up to you and perhaps some of your committee colleagues as well.
Great, thank you. And councillors, any other questions on the safeguarding report? No. Okay, great. Let me just get my agenda back up. Come on, that. Okay, so the next item is the Work, Leisure and Learning Programme update from, I think this is coming from you, Rachel. Have you got anything to show us on screen, or are we just handing it over to you?
Yes, I am going to share a presentation, but firstly, I just wanted to make you aware that my colleague Pamela Ayer was due to present today. She is going to join the call, and she may already be on the call.
Pamela's here. Hi, Pam.
Right, okay.
Welcome to Scrutiny.
Unfortunately, Pamela has woken up without a voice this morning, so it is pretty much a prerequisite when you are, delivering a presentation. So I'm going to present Pamela's notes today. So please bear with me, but Pamela has joined just to answer any specific questions. So I am going to share my screen. Bear with me a second. Okay, is that actually sharing?
I can just say, it just says Rachel Evans has started screen sharing.
Okay.
Members, do you want to just put your microphones on mute? I don't know if it's me just getting some feedback or...
Oh, sorry, Chair.
That's okay. I don't know if it was you, Liz, or something else.
I think my dog was barking. But...
Rachel, do you want me to try?
Oh, would you mind? Because it doesn't seem to be working for me. I've lost everyone. Have I lost everyone?
No, you're still here.
Oh, everything is my screen is completely frozen, unfortunately.
I think you need to stop sharing. There we go. Hang on.
I do apologise. I can't.
Rachel, how long is this presentation going to take? Just so I'm aware, it can work to us finishing at 12ish. Are we talking sort of 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20 minutes. I think the focus for me is to have an opportunity to have a discussion with Scrutiny. I know that we've had previous discussions around the engagement piece of work that we're about to embark on. And I know that Scrutiny are really keen to get involved. So today is essentially just to provide an update on where we are, but also to open up that conversation and provide look at how Scrutiny can support some of this work and make sure that we are having the right conversations with the right people to make sure that we're crafting this in the right way. So that's essentially the purpose of today.
Okay.
But
you've completely frozen on my screen now, Rachel.
Yes, and so
do you want to
I think I might have to
rejoin.
Yes.
I'm also going to just run and get a tissue. I'm sorry about that. So I'm just going to be 2 seconds. If we could all just hold fire for just a couple of minutes whilst we get this presentation ready, that would be great.
Connor, my screen sharing doesn't seem to be working either. Could I send you the presentation? Could you see if you could?
Yes, no, that's fine. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why. Okay, that should be with you now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll get that up now.
Okay, any luck with them with Rachel coming back in?
I'm just going to try and share through my laptop now. Share.
Okay, great. Yep, I can see screen.
Thanks, Connor. Could you put it onto read view? You might have to open in the app for that. I don't think Rachel's back yet.
I'll just stop sharing.
Gremlins.
Yep.
There we go.
Is that okay, Panda?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is Rachel back online?
I can't see her.
No, I can't. Connor, can we see if do we need to invite her back in or?
Yes, I'll just try that now. Just stop sharing so I can send Rachel the invite link again.
Share. Otherwise, if Rachel's not able to get back in, I can start. But you may have to bear with me, and it may not be the most appealing delivery.
I don't want you to hurt your voice, so let's just give her one more minute and then we'll make a decision.
She's just shown us a way, Chair, on
Yeah, I
Teams.
just saw
So
that.
I think maybe she might have restarted the laptop, or Zoom might be restarting. I've sent her the direct link again, so she should be able to join as soon as she's back on. Ah, here we go. She's back on.
Hi, Rachel. Are you on mute? Connor, are you able
I'm
to
so
get that
sorry.
presentation back up? That's okay, don't worry.
My computer completely switched itself off, so I had to restart.
That's all right. Right, we've got the presentation
Okay.
and you're here, so off we go.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and rattle through this as quickly as I can. As I mentioned before I got cut off, the purpose of today is essentially to provide an update in terms of where we are with this quite innovative and extensive project, but also to use the opportunity really to have really good constructive conversation with you as Scrutiny members to help craft and design and shape some of this work so that we are using this opportunity as wisely as we possibly can. Okay, so just to give a little bit of context, so if we move on, Pamela, thanks, that'd be great.
Connor's got it.
That's right, that's it. Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Connor. Just to give a little bit of the context to this work, so just casting our minds back to the pandemic and pre-pandemic, we are aware that we have in Powys, traditional models of day services and day centres. And for some time, they have provided people with really good opportunities and delivered really good outcomes. But as part of the pandemic process, we're all aware that we hit a crisis point where we needed to close services very quickly. And, that was really unfortunate. And, but it was a controlled closure as best we possibly can. At the time, what we saw was organisations who really worked together and diversified their service offer and were able to fill the gap in terms of those service closures and provide a very bespoke and individualised alternative in order to make sure that daytime offer continued to be in place. And certainly we had really good examples of some supported living providers where they would tailor some of the offer within their existing services, as well as using our day centre and day services staff to reach in terms of those services. So again, it was a really good example of how services could work very differently in a very short space of time. Then we moved into a period of recovery and return, and that's not just in terms of daytime opportunities, but across all our services. And it did present an opportunity for reflection in terms of what worked and what didn't work. And we certainly used some of our supported living providers, in fact, all of the providers, to take that opportunity to have a conversation with individuals to understand that in a bit more detail. It was really interesting. We had some really good information, and what that told us is the things that really mattered to people, certainly younger adults with a learning disability, was the relationships and friendships that they had with other people, and the opportunity to get together and to have some of those shared experiences. So that really did provide us with some baseline information at the time, which was really helpful. But we also recognised that we had information gaps, and it was very much a reflective piece as opposed to looking into the future. At the same time, we had embarked quite an extensive project around work, leisure and learning. So this extended way beyond daytime opportunities to understand how we can support people better around their employment opportunities. We recognise in Powys that we have a workforce deficit, not just in Powys, on a national level, and actually people have a lot to offer and a lot to give. So we need to understand how we can enable people's skills to have the best opportunities to be employment ready. So that work, leisure and learning work stream was very much in train and supported through the Regional Partnership Board. And we were really successful in having short-term resource in terms of additional capacity through regional integration funding in order to support that project. And then looking to the future, at the same time, although this started quite later on, we also wanted to take a similar approach across older person services, recognising that equally we had seen some service disruption as a result of the pandemic. And whilst some services had commenced operation, although limited in some areas, we wanted to understand what the future looks like and to really understand what people's future aspirations are and to make sure that people are having their outcomes met. So it's very much an opportunity to look to the future. What we recognised is that, you know, there are two pieces of work that were quite similar, and we needed to make sure that these weren't working in isolation. So it was a really good opportunity to create a collective resource, bring those ideas together, to create a team of people, essentially, to provide shared learning, peer support, and to really develop our expertise across commissioning and social care around co-production. What we know is a key aspect of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act is a requirement to co-produce services, but often we use that term interchangeably when we actually mean engagement. So this was a good opportunity to capitalise and bring that co-learning together. It's also an opportunity to explore different models to ensure that we put in the person at the centre of the offer, and also to understand what does good look like. You know, do we understand what is good, and do people and people need to be involved in that in order to help us understand what that offer looks like. And in addition, we wanted to understand what the community can offer, and, you know, how universal services contribute to a meaningful daytime opportunity, and what we need to do to support communities to build capacity in order to be to have that stronger foothold in terms of that community offer. So that's essentially the context and the background to this quite extensive piece of work. Okay, then moving on. Okay, so as I've already explained, and this slide pretty much sharpens up that context. So the remit and scope of this work is to engage with adults with learning disabilities and older people, carers, communities, and other stakeholders in co-producing their service they want now and for the future. So this is very much about looking to the future and ensuring that our services are as sustainable as possible. As I've already mentioned, the start of this project started within the Work, Leisure and Learning project, around engaging people around their daytime opportunities, employment and leisure. And now this is extended to include older people. So this is a cross-population piece of work. Okay, and just moving on. Okay, because as I mentioned, the traditional model of day services and day opportunities provide individuals with a chance to enhance their well-being, develop relationships, and gain new skills. They enable people to become more independent and live fulfilling lives. And daytime opportunities also provide support to carers by providing respite so that they can pursue interests outside their caring role. So essentially, the traditional model is twofold. It's often place-based and associated with buildings and community buildings, but it also provides a really important function in terms of supporting the carer, and in shaping and understanding what a good model needs to look like. It's really important that we absolutely reflect on that key aspect and ensure that, you know, whatever we do in the future, that we are in a strong position to continue to meet the outcomes of carers. So daytime opportunities within the existing model will, as I said, typically include a building-based offer. They are very much targeted around activities and targeting bespoke and individualized activities such as disability support, writing, and a well-being group. And those are very much specific activities around the person. And then daytime opportunities are pretty much open to everybody. So it is important to recognize that, you know, this is a universal offer. Okay, and then moving on. Okay, so I think it's really important to highlight the underpinning principles of this work as we go forward. And they're based around three key areas: co-production, making sure that we're strengths-based, and sharing good practice. So as I mentioned, co-production We often use the term interchangeably to mean different things, but co-production very much is sharing the opportunity for people to craft services for themselves and to feel as though they have that equal partnership and say in terms of how services work. So it's really important to recognise that whilst engagement is a fundamental part of that, co-production really much is about enabling people to have that choice and control. So, you know, co-production means that it will underpin the work that we do. We will be involving service providers, and we will be working collectively with third sector organisations who are already sitting on the task and finish group. And it also includes a range of mixed methods. We want to make sure that the engagement piece is as broad and encompassing as possible. So it'll involve surveys, public events, focus groups and interviews. And we want to make sure that this is, we want to cast the net as wide as possible because this is such a valuable opportunity. We want to make sure that it's strengths-based and involves recognising that people have assets and something to give. And we certainly don't want to, you know, create a deficit model. This isn't about giving somebody a service. This is about recognising that people have something to offer and something to contribute. So very much taking an asset-based community development approach to this. And we also want to make sure that we are learning from the lived experience of people and also other pieces of work. We are very much engaged in other work streams, recognising that we've got a long-standing transition project in place, you know, recognising that we've got a project around climate action. And the existing leisure review also creates an opportunity to make sure that we're linked up. And we've already started having really good conversations to make sure that that work is aligning well. Okay, and then next slide. In terms of the methodology, so we want to make sure that we're taking a cooperative inquiry approach to this, you know, because essentially it is a piece of research. And we've put a quotation up there that helpfully describes what we mean by cooperative inquiry. So cooperative inquiry is a way of working with other people who have similar concerns that interest yourself in order to understand your world, make sense of your life, and develop new and creative ways of looking at things. Learn how to act to change things you want and to change and find out how to do things for the better. So that essentially pretty much sums up the cooperative inquiry approach that we're taking as part of this work. We want to make sure that it's robust and evidence-based, and some of the groundwork that we've already done so far is to link up with other local authorities to understand, you know, the progress of the work that they've undertaken so far. And we've certainly had a lot of learning from Pembrokeshire and other Welsh authorities where they've got really good innovative models in place, and they've already undertaken this inquiry piece. So it's been an opportunity to use them as peer support in terms of what's worked and what's not worked so well. It's also important to recognise that the work that started within Work, Leisure and Learning has already, you know, achieved quite a lot in terms of that engagement piece with adults with a learning disability. So we already have some early learning and some information from that work so far. And some of the things that we've recognised is the need to work alongside people, you know, recognising that people have different speech and language and communication needs. So as part of the learning disability aspect, we needed to make sure that we were taking a one-to-one opportunity with individuals to ensure that they had the opportunity to understand, they had the right context, they had the right information, so that they can absolutely fully engage as possible. Whilst we recognise that's quite a time-consuming approach, it's really important to make sure that we are crafting this absolutely right. So we've already learned from that, and that's been, you know, really valuable experience.
Rachel, I'm just getting slightly conscious of time because
Yep.
we've still got another agenda item, and I think really some of this information, it would have been really helpful for us to have read through in advance so that you could just give us the headlines. So perhaps we could have these slides sent to us afterwards. Because I know
That's absolutely
I'm
fine.
sure that members are going to have questions, and really the crux of what we want to know is where you're at with engagement, and are you at the stage where you're starting to shape anything, or are you still really early days?
Okay, so essentially, and if we just move on slightly, okay, so you go on another slide. Yeah, so I think this is probably the most helpful is around the key dates. So as I mentioned, you know, some of this work is already commenced with learning disabilities, and we're already working methodically through that. In terms of older people, these are some of the key dates. So essentially, the work consists of two main areas. First one is around mapping of services. You know, what daytime opportunities currently exist, understanding demand, using existing information such as the population needs assessment. And the key dates for that piece of work is between September and December of this year. We've also got planned public meetings. So provisionally, we've got those in place for between the 13th and the 25th of November. And that engagement piece is going to be county-wide. And as I said, that would be very much based on a public meeting type discussion opportunity. In addition to that, we have a survey that we have pretty much ready. It's going to translation, and we're hoping to go live with that at the end of this month, and go live by the 16th of October with a closing date of December of this year. And then moving on to the next slide. In terms of the key dates around the engagement, we are hoping to get that completed by December of this year, and then from January 24 be in a position where we can reflect back that information, test out some of the themes that have emerged, and also use those secondary conversations to make sure that we're forming the right conclusions from that engagement piece. So it's really important that we have that feedback loop in terms of that engagement. But yes, essentially that's where we are in terms of those timescales. The questions are very much quite open. They are very much focused on understanding what works well for people, understanding what does a good opportunity look like, what does a good life look like, understanding carers' needs in terms of a daytime opportunity, and being able to use those discursive questions, not only just to people who currently use services, but the future generation of older people who, you know, in 5-10 years time would be in a position where they would be perhaps needing that type of service. So it's very much about understanding what a good life looks like. So that type of discursive questioning will be applied to all people, including professionals, third sector organisations and the wider community. So that's very much where we are in terms of that crafting. You know, the work so far has really been involved doing that groundwork, undertaking the research, building up the team. We have appointed our final member of the team only last week, who was just about to commence in post. So we now have a full team of people who are very much good to go on this, and have already gathered lots of information as baseline data to enable this work to progress. So that's essentially where we are. The governance is quite straightforward. We report into the Transformation Board as well as the RPB, because obviously this work is twofold. And as I said, it's much wider in terms of work, leisure and learning, but we have a really strong governance arrangement in place, and already have good links with the third sector organisations and Llais, who will be supporting us in this work as well. Okay. So that's essentially where we are, and you know, just really wanted to open up the conversation today to look at how, you know, you can support us in this work, and to test whether we are pitching this engagement piece in the right way.
Yeah, I think, thank you, thanks for that. I think we absolutely, as you know, want to be involved in scrutinising this work, and I'm glad that you've brought us this today. Would it be okay with you, and also if Connor could help us with this, if we could set up within our health and care scrutiny teams area a dedicated folder area for everything to do with this, so that you can put in this presentation and anything that you think would be particularly interesting for us to read. I'm particularly keen to hear what you've learned from Pembrokeshire, not just because that's where I'm from, but because I know they're a really good comparable local rural authority, where a lot of elderly people move to and retire to. So I think any kind of papers you've got that would be helpful,
brilliant.
please put them in there. And also just to say, you know, we really want this to come back to scrutiny.
Yes.
And in, you know, as each stage it goes, I'm hoping that anything you can give us in advance, rather than you having to talk us through everything, will just enable us to get right to the crux of what we want to ask. And getting right to the crux of what we want to ask, I'm just going to kick off with a question, and I can see Liz has got her hand up as well, is have you done an audit of everyone who went to day centres previously, so you know you've got all of those contacts and names? I know you're doing a lot of outreach, but do we have a list of people from the outset who we know we want to engage with?
I think I can answer that one. Yes, we do. So the service area hold obviously those people as cases within WICID. As a work, leisure and learning project team, we have looked at who's on that, and they're being targeted for the engagement, specifically the public meetings. They're the first tranche of people being invited to the engagement. As well as that, our officer who's started on the engagement with the learning disability services has received a full list of those people and been making visits around the county and has spoken to 90 people so far, which includes service users, their carers and families, and staff within those day services.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Liz. You're on mute.
Quick question. I hope it gets a quick answer. How does this fit in with the commissioning cycle now for older people and learning disability? Where are we in terms of contracts coming to an end and the commissioning cycle starting again?
So with regard to our commission day centres, I believe there is one which is under discussion at the moment with Shaw regarding whether that is going to be taken in as part of one of their facilities or whether that's going to be kept separately. Other day centres, a lot of them are internal, as you'll be aware. The ones that are commissioned, there isn't currently an imminent recommissioning date on those, so we're still very much in the do review section of the cycle.
I wasn't just thinking about day centres, because obviously this discussion has been around, you know, the person-centred co-production of different services in different places for people with disabilities linked into learning and leisure. There are a lot of disability providers out there that are on contracts. So, you know, I was kind of imagining that when this piece of work is completed, it will be used to inform the next round of commissioning for all services.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely right.
And this is a vital part of the commissioning cycle. The commissioning cycle, you know, it's part of that discovery phase. And in order to ensure that that discovery phase is as extensive as possible, we need to make sure that we're involving the views of individuals who use that service. As part of contract recommissioning, we would also typically look at lots of other things. You know, we start off with a baseline contract, and there are certain things that we would expect to see within a contract. And as part of our routine contract monitoring and contract review, we would look to measure against those that contract specification. So there are lots of other things we would also look at as part of that process. But engagement and the voice of the individual is absolutely paramount in that process.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll save all the rest of my questions for next time, because I think it is something that we'll need to spend time on.
Yeah, Rachel, so following the engagement and consultations, when are we when are you hoping to be in a position to have looked at all that and then to be bringing this back here?
Well, we are looking to complete the consultation, and these are sort of high-level milestones at this point. And and I think some of the risks that we've identified as part of this project is scope creep, because as part of being sustainable and looking to the future, we recognise that yes, there's an engagement piece to have with people who are currently using or previously did use services. But in order for this to be sustainable, it's about having a wider conversation with the public around the future. So this is much, much broader than existing services. This is very much aspirational around the future. And the danger of that is scope creep. So we have put a milestone in terms of completing the engagement by December, which, yes, is very ambitious, but we do have a really good team of people to do that work. And we will be using services and existing resources in order to help support that work and to be able to reflect that work back to people, stakeholders, professionals, service users and the community in January. And we are expecting that work to take around about 2 months. So we are hopeful to be in a position to have this work completed and have a set of recommendations and outcomes by March of next year.
So
but as I said, it's an ambitious piece of work.
Okay. So back to scrutiny in the early spring is what you're thinking?
I think that's reasonable, yes. But
Okay.
But obviously we are trying to do this at pace without compromising the quality of that work.
Have you already spoken with the county councillors who have day services in their wards? And so that they're aware of all of the engagement that you're going to be doing?
We have a list. I think we have started those conversations, but we recognise that we need to continue those conversations. What we have pulled together at this point is a communication strategy. So we are working on a locality basis in terms of identifying within each locality what that comms strategy needs to look like and who are the key individuals that need to be involved and engaged in that piece of work. So that's part of that mapping strand, as I mentioned in the presentation. So it's very much understanding who are the people that we need to have a conversation with, who are the ones that have the local knowledge, because we recognise that each locality is going to be very different as well.
Yeah, I think it would be, recommendations from us because of what we've said previously, is that members are aware as soon as possible so that they can start working out how they can spread this information as well, that this is taking place. So, you've got very tight timeframes as it is.
Yeah.
So, even if it's just an informal email, members need to know that this is coming.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Just a slight point for me as well on how this has been titled on our agenda. I think going forward, we need to just call this what it is. It's the review of daytime opportunities and services. I know that what you're saying is you're encapsulating within that this work, leisure and learning programme update. But I think in the interest of transparency for the public, we just need to really say what it is. Councillor Shan, can see you've got your hand up. Yeah, great to hear from you on your perspective on all this and what you see your role is as Cabinet member.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going back in on the point of contacting councillors, and this is something I'm staying on top of and will be part of those discussions. I made a commitment to Scrutiny and that I would contact councillors directly to keep them informed about this and to make sure they knew what was coming up in their area as part of this when it got off the ground. So I haven't forgotten that commitment. It was something I was going to do anyway before I committed to Scrutiny to do that. So I'm keeping on top of that and I'll make sure that's done.
Thank you. And we'll keep that on our recommendation tracker so that we can tick it off once we know that they've all been spoken to. And we'll include as a recommendation, please, Connor, that we want an area in our teams dedicated to this. And any other members got any other questions before we move on to the next item? Rachel?
I just wanted to apologise for you not having the information in advance, and I'll make sure that any future presentations you have the opportunity to go through the information. But
that would be great. Thank you.
But really
No, I
good
appreciate
idea
that.
in terms of setting up a team site. So we'll drop all of the information into that, and I think that will be really helpful for us as well. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Just one final point is that I do really want us to consider how we hear from service users directly on this point. And I know that's the purpose of your engagement, but the purpose of us is to scrutinise not just what the outcomes are going to be, but also how you go about engaging. So I'm giving that some thought with other officers. And potentially we would look to maybe put out a questionnaire to a random sample from those information that you've got, just so that we can understand, how have you heard about this? Have you attended one of these events? What kind of questions did you get asked? Were you able to ask all the questions you wanted to ask? Those kind of things, which sound very basic, but I think that's I see that as part of our role.
Yes, so I was just going to say, and I think that would be helpful because it gives the process that added dimension of rigor, I think.
Yeah, and also I think it's one of our recommendations to ourselves as a panel that we want to do more engagement with service users. So and start seeing how that could work in terms of effective scrutiny. So great, thank you. The next item is an exempt item. So we need to just hear briefly from you as to why it's an exempt, and just then make a decision on going into private session. I know, Connor, we've got the work programme, but I'm going to push that to potentially take offline because of time constraints. And we have discussed that quite recently at our last meeting.
Oh.
So Rachel, can you just briefly give us a reason why the item number 9 is confidential?
Yes, it includes commercially sensitive information.
Okay. In terms of
organisations, commissioned organisations, yes.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a proposer, please, that we go into private session? Thank you. Edwin, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Liz and Josie. I've got those. Okay, right. We resolve then to go into private session, please, and to stop public streaming, please, Connor.
No problem, Chair. Let me just do that.